Always and everywhere, power seeks to expand its reach and centralize control. This expansion of power has never been arrested by abstract principle or words on paper. It's only ever checked by the existence of opposing powers. Those opposing powers must have deep roots and independent resilience and the ability to demand loyalty. They must project a sphere of influence in areas that are difficult for the state to replicate, providing a form of sovereignty that can resist the power of the government without having to engage in physical conflict. Communities with robust histories and traditions provide these opposing spheres of sovereignty. The religion and folkways of these communities are established by generation after generation, practicing them as if they are simply part of the rhythm of life. The beliefs are transcendent, deriving authority from forces that no earthly power can reproduce. These communities build institutions to perpetuate their way of life and care for the well-being of their members. Churches, schools, libraries, civic organizations, unions, and fraternal organizations pass down the values of that community, preserve its culture, and aid members who require assistance. Robust community creates an opposing sphere of sovereignty because it can make competing demands on its members. The organizations inside the community provide critical services that the state cannot, and provide a level of emotional and spiritual well-being that the state can't compete with. It also requires a set of behaviors that are particular to the community if the members intend to stay in good standing, behaviors that the state can't easily alter. The loyalty of the members is necessarily split between the community and the government, which prevents the state from expanding its reach. The way of life in the community is deeply ingrained through hundreds, if not thousands, of years of custom and habit, and the state is required to respect that if it doesn't want to face serious resistance. The inhabitants of virtuous and well-organized communities that have existed over hundreds of years tend to accumulate wealth over time. That's a benefit of being established over generations and maintaining virtuous habits. They have the extra capital and leisure necessary to build robust institutions which can provide critical services and act as a safety net for their members. These are the kulaks, the middle class that have moved on from base subsistence to independence. Now, this isn't the hyper-individualism that is often called self-reliance in the modern world, but a form of community reliance that allows its members stability. Those who are part of the community don't have to live in fear of their day-to-day needs being met. They're not reliant on government services when things go wrong, and so their loyalty belongs to the community first. That's why the government needs to destroy them. In his book on power, the political theorist Bertrand de Juvenal describes the classic strategy of high and low versus the middle. The ruling class seeks to expand and centralize its power, but the middle class stands in the way. The lower classes rarely pose a threat because they're dependent and disorganized. They don't have the excess capital or leisure time necessary to marshal political opposition. It's the middle class with their private property, institutions, and wealth who can adhere to their long-standing traditions while withstanding pressure from the state. In order to gain more power, the ruling class must find a way to dissolve all opposing spheres of sovereignty, including those created by robust middle-class communities. To achieve this goal, the ruling class allies with lower dependent classes that can be used to unseat the entrenched kulaks. Sometimes it uses the domestic underclass, but this is less than ideal because they also tend to possess the same folkways and traditions as the middle class. You really need to have a huge culture gap between the lower and middle classes, a lot of class envy ultimately for this to work. Now, bringing in a foreign underclass, that's far more reliable because they have zero connection to the land or its traditions and are more willing to turn against those that are already residing there. Mass immigration provides cheap labor, which tends to benefit the upper class that can afford nannies and gardeners, but it also provides a large body of new voters to whom promises can be made. The diversity of the immigrant lower class means it doesn't have a cohesive culture or a set of traditions that can resist the will of the state. They don't have the roots necessary to build resilient institutions that can help those in need. They don't have the leisure or will to organize effective political opposition. The lower immigrant class is dependent on the ruling class for their ability to enter the country, get work, achieve civil rights, and obtain access to the franchise. They often don't speak the language and tend to require some level of state welfare. It's not just that the immigrant class is not motivated to oppose the expansion of the state, they actually require its growth in order to succeed. In order to provide these services to its new political allies, the ruling class pillages the middle class. The kulaks are blamed for the inequality that now exists within society and are guilted or eventually compelled into giving up some of what they have built in order to provide for the immigrant class. This transfer of wealth from the middle class to the new dependent class helps the rulers secure power over the immigrants, but very importantly, it also helps to weaken the kulaks, who are a natural barrier to the expansion of state power. As they become poorer, the kulaks lose the private property and leisure time that allowed them to build resilient institutions. Their day-to-day existence becomes more unstable, and they're more likely to end up dependent on state services. Mass immigration also erodes the well-established culture, which proved to be a barrier to power. People in a community with deeply held traditions limit what the government can command, but diverse groups with no unified culture have no such resistance. As the native communities are forced to regularly interact with the new arrivals, their shared identity begins to erode. It's considered taboo to separate yourself from the newcomers or to maintain a separate culture. The community institutions that once transmitted culture and helped those in need start to close. The charities are exploited, the common areas are defiled, and those who maintain them see no reason to continue the effort for people they don't really recognize and with whom they share very little in common. The ruling class makes it first taboo and then illegal for the communities to relocate and reform. Anyone who attempts to retreat from the consequences of mass immigration and reconstitute their old way of life becomes an anathema. The kulaks are no longer allowed to reside in communities where they can live in the virtuous patterns of their ancestors or transmit those traditions through institutions, and the virtue quickly fades. The opposing spheres of sovereignty are destroyed, and everyone becomes a rootless dependent of a state that now has a blank check to expand its power. This is why mass immigration becomes a priority for almost every Western liberal democracy. It's a strategy that not only removes the barriers to expanding state power, but actually creates a patronage machine that demands and fuels the expansion. If we want an elite class that's responsive to the needs of the population they govern, we must first cut off their access to outside populations that they can use to undermine the natives. The middle class and its natural spheres of opposing sovereignty must be restored. Then, and only then, can we hope to cage the Leviathan our ruling class has created. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and click like, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a great time to do so. If you'd like to get these broadcasts as podcasts, make sure to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform, and if you do, leave that rating or review. It really helps with the algorithm magic. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, or Gab, or Substack, or Instagram, if you'd like to watch these videos on Odyssey or Rumble, the links to do that are down below in the description. If you'd like to watch any of my shows, or read any of my columns, you can head over to The Blaze. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'll talk to you next time.